Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Generation 2020. I hope that you are all having a great time and enjoying being with us. In this session, we'll have Isabel Costa and presenting us why, where, and how to contribute to open source. Hello, Isabel. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. I'm
Doing
fine.
fine? Okay, great. Ready to rock this session?
Yes,
All
let's
right.
go.
Okay, let's go. So, without further delays, let's go. I will hand over to you. Thank you, Isabel, for being with us, and have
Yeah,
a great time.
thank you for having me. Okay, so let's start. Um, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for attending my call, my talk right now. So I'm here to talk about why, where, and how to contribute to open source because I really love this topic. So, a little bit about myself. I am a software engineer from Portugal, and I'm involved with open source in about 3 years. I started in 2017 through 24 pull requests, which is an open source program that I will talk more ahead. And then I joined other programs like Google Summer of Code and Google Coding as a mentor. And now I'm one of the admins and a contributor and a maintainer for anitb.org open source. So who is this talk for? I really want to clarify this. So open source is often talked a lot within the developer community, but I want to be clear that this talk is for anyone within the tech industry or interested in getting into the tech industry and potentially contributing to open source. And it's for all levels of experience and all types of contributions. So what does open source mean? Um, well, often you may hear about a term called FOSS, FOSS, which is free open source software. So usually when people talk about open source, they talk about the process of contributing to FOSS projects. Um, and also sometimes when I think about open source, I think about the whole collaboration process uh, to contribute to a project together. So usually the environment, you may have to talk with people you don't know, you just know online from the platform that hosts the project. And you may have to work together with someone to get your contribution merged into a project. So in my head, often when I think about open source, I just think about the whole collaborative process and this remote environment where, yes, you can talk with someone from the other part of the globe and contribute to a project together. So let's first start with the why. Why can people contribute to open source? So one of the first reasons that I can come up with is learning. And what do I mean by this? When you contribute to open source, you may learn about um, good practices or bad practices when developing software. You may learn about how to build and maintain a project. You may learn new technologies um, and also learn different ways of working than when you work at your job. Uh, One thing that I totally learned through working in open source was to talk in public forums and being aware of that I may talk with a diverse set of people that usually I might not have at the workplace. I never know who I may talk to. So I guess it improved my communication skills and not just technical skills. Okay, another reason that I can come up with is practice your skills. So imagine you are already a good I don't know software tester, but perhaps you want to try to contribute to open source with your testing skills and hone your skills and improve them, or even broaden your skill set and contribute in other ways than testing. Imagine if you want to get into coding. Imagine if you want to change your role within tech industry. Um, this is a good place to do it. So another reason it's building a portfolio. When I started contributing to open source, in my mind, I wanted to practice my skills. I was still in college. I was finishing college, and I wanted another environment where I could learn more and practice my skills and develop a public portfolio. So by having a public portfolio, if you're looking for a job, potential recruiters can see already your public work. Where sometimes when you work at a job, your work is private, it's closed source. And with open source, your work is visible to everyone. And you can show off your communication skills while communicating with maintainers and other contributors. You can show all the skills that you use and you practice when contributing to open source. And again, imagine if you're a software engineer and you want to go into a test route. Or imagine if you're a technical writer and you want to become a coder. You can learn coding on your spare time and build your portfolio of work contributing to projects with code. Another reason that comes to my mind is volunteerism. And I'll get to another reason, which is a bit more specific. But if I think about volunteerism, for example, there's a project that the World Health Organization is creating using Flutter framework for a COVID-19 app. And they set up Google Forms to get volunteers to contribute to the app. So imagine you want to use your time to volunteer with your skills to open source. That's a total valid reason to contribute. Um, so now a more specific way of volunteering is give back. So perhaps you use open source libraries at work if you're a software engineer, and you may want to give back to that project, right? That your work depends upon. So giving back to the community is also a good reason to contribute to open source. And I even heard a past colleague talk about contributing to Hacktoberfest, which is an initiative, an open source initiative, and using that initiative to give back to the developer community, to the open source community. So I hope I gave you a good idea of some of the whys. I could even go into my whys, but it's basically all of the reasons that are there. And I like what I do in open source, right? I do it on my spare time. So if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. So now I want to pass to the where, now that we have the why clarified. When we think about the where, we might think about which platforms to use to contribute to open source, or which projects to contribute to, or which communities. Um, so for example, in terms of projects, you may contribute to a singular project. My first contribution was actually, I went into the 24 pull request website and I searched for Markdown projects and I just contributed to it. And then I went with my life, all good. Regarding communities, a project will naturally have a community around it, a community of developers or other types of contributors who are interested in moving the project forward. Right now, Anita be open source, the community I referred to in my intro. I stayed there ever since I joined Google Summer of Code because of many reasons that I will talk in the future when I give a shout out. But basically, the good thing about communities is that you may get a common mission among the projects that the organization or community has. A common mission, a common code of conduct, contribution guidelines. So, and in that way, you're already used to the environment and to the community and the members of the community. And then you just have to worry with the project itself. And yeah, the sense of community, I think it's great. It's also good sometimes contributing to singular projects without being attached in any way. I do it sometimes, but the community sense of it, for example, in NTB open source, We have, I know that I can count on people to contribute to a specific type of contribution, like quality assurance, design. I know that I can, if I don't know something, I just say, hey, I don't know this. Let's let's see what we can do next to figure out the solution for this. So yes, I'm talking a lot about communities. It's real because I love it. So in terms of platforms, these are the most popular platforms, I would say. And if I want to be a bit more specific, I would say that GitHub is most popular in terms of open source projects. At least from my experience, when I contribute to open source, I use mainly GitHub. But I also know there's GitLab and Bitbucket. And in my opinion, in terms of, if you ask me, so Isabel, which platform should I use? It depends. It depends on the project you're contributing to. For example, GitLab is open source on GitLab. The projects within the community, I mean, they are open source on GitHub. And actually, I don't have examples for Bitbucket, but there's also open source projects there. So it depends on the project you're contributing to in the end. So now talking a bit about projects and communities, I put up some examples here. Some developers might know Visual Studio Code, Free Code Camp, or Dev2. Dev2 is a platform to write blog posts, and they became open source about 1 or 2 years ago, I'm not sure. And this platform is written in Ruby on Rails, and it's totally open source, so you could contribute to it if you want. Visual Studio Code from Microsoft is also open source. Free Code Camp, some people might know because of their way of learning web development. Their curriculum and their website is totally open source, so you can also contribute to it. And then there's other examples. For example, If Me is a mental health app. I think it has a community around it. It's also built with Ruby on Rails. Electric IO is a visual dashboard for smart homes. So it's more of a hardware project in a sense. And then on the top, I have Awesome. You can see the glasses, right? Awesome, which represents basically awesome lists. You may find on GitHub some open source projects which are just a bunch of Markdown files, or just a README with resources for within a specific topic. For example, there's Awesome Python, which has resources to learn Python. The briefcase there is the first project I'm contributing within open source, which is called hire.me, and has resources to help people on job search. I remember that when I went to 24 pull requests, I searched Markdown project and I find this one. And then I thought, I went throughout the project and I thought, oh, there's a job board that I know, a European one, and it's not there. So I just submitted a pull request after seeing the contribution guidelines. And there are many other projects. For example, I mentioned already COVID-19 app, and this is being developed in Flutter from the World Health Organization. If you go to github.com/World Health Organization, you will find the app within that organization profile. And it's open source, right? So you can just go there and try to contribute. There's also, so a brief mention to communities. When I tried to apply to Google Summer of Code in 2018, I found Open Food Facts and Open Data Kit. Open Data Kit, they basically have software for resource constrained environments, and Open Food Facts has an app for sharing food facts. Well, it's in the name. And there's also Zulip. Zulip I actually discovered this year, and this is a communication platform just as Slack. You may know Slack. So Zulip is sort of that. And it's totally open source, and we are actually using in the community I'm in. And there's also need2be.org open source, and we have projects for social good, and we do a lot of stuff there, which is exciting, and I will talk more further. And now I want to give a little shout out to Portuguese open source projects. I'm still young, new to the Portuguese open source ecosystem, but I try to pay attention to it. And I know there's certain projects like Política para Todos, which is meant to promote active citizenship during Portugal elections. There's also Flutter Portugal, which is a community that organizes events around Flutter. There's React Kawaii, which is a React library, a library with SVG illustration that you can use on your website through React components. And yesterday, I found data science for social good. I saw this on Twitter, and I was like, "What is this?" And basically, this is a community of data scientists, and they have projects revolving using data science and for social good. For example, they have data related to COVID-19 in Portugal. So some things to be aware of when you're choosing a project or a community to be a part of. Regarding the project, is it well documented? Is it active or archived? For example, if it is archived, the maintainers may not be looking for new contributions. But I mean, it's open source. You can still fork it and do changes on it, right? Are the maintainers responsive? For example, if you submit a pull request, will you get a response from maintainers? Is the project alive? Do they have a code of conduct? Do they have a contribution guidelines? Usually contribution guidelines, most projects have it, right? Because this is the way for maintainers to tell the contributors what they expect when you do a contribution. And code of conduct, well, it sets the bar for the behavior within a project. Regarding communities, are the communities inclusive? Are the communities transparent, and do they promote open communication? Are they beginner friendly? I think this is very important if you starting. Imagine if you're a newbie at coding, and you're just starting contributing to open source. So having a beginner friendly community uh, may make you feel comfortable saying when you don't know something. But if they are not, well, maybe they are not the right one for you to start with. Are they open for every type of contributions? I think this is important, especially when you have in mind that open source is not just about coding, that you can contribute with quality assurance, you can contribute with the design. Are they open for people to bring new perspectives and contribute with other stuff other than coding? That for me is important. Uh, so regarding initiatives, there's plenty of initiatives out there, but I wanted to share some of them. For example, Google Summer of Code is the one I was that I was accepted as a student, and now I'm a mentor slash admin. And this was basically the program that got me introduced to open source, like an immersive experience, a 3 months period of coding a project from scratch. And I got to know the many layers of an open source project. Um, in Google Summer of Code, this is for university students, while Outreachy is similar to Google Summer of Code in terms of period and giving a stipend to students. But Outreach is not for students. Outreachy is meant for underrepresented people in tech. There's also Season of Docs, and this is a new initiative, and this is for technical writers. This is specifically for technical writers who write documentation. Google Coding, this is for pre-university students from 13 to 17 years old to basically complete tasks. It's like a competition where they have to solve tasks, and in the end of the competition, the organizations select the best student. Hacktoberfest and 24 pull requests, they are slightly different of the other programs, which are a bit more meaty. Hacktoberfest happens in October, 24 pull requests happens in December because it has a Christmas theme, like, right? It's to give back to open source during Christmas. I actually never contributed to Oktoberfest, but I know it's quite popular. Um, I know that if you submit 4 pull requests, I think it doesn't need to be March. If you submit 4 pull requests, you can receive a T-shirt from Oktoberfest. And 24 pull requests is, well, you go to the website, you uh, type in a technology you want to use, and you can find a project to contribute to, a project that is listed on the website. So it's open for contribution. And that's actually how I started. So you can totally start with these initiatives. Now, to wrap up the where, I want to just summarize where can you find projects and communities. So in terms of projects, you may use open source libraries, just as I said, that you use at work and you want to enhance the features. So you can look at projects you use or projects you care about that you know that are open source. In terms of communities well established or organized, if you're just starting and you maybe want to take advantage of being in a community and lurking a little bit or seeing how contributors interact with themselves, a good idea is to go to the Google Summer of Code list of organizations page, right? You can see the organizations that were accepted this year or past years if you look at the archives. And basically, those organizations were accepted because they have projects which are ready to be contributed to. And you can also start with the initiatives that I just mentioned. That's how I started, actually. And there's also some websites like Up for Grabs, Code Triage, this happened throughout the whole year. For example, Oktoberfest and 24 pull requests are seasoned initiatives, right? 24 pull requests during December, Oktoberfest during October. And Code Triage and Up for Grabs, it's a website which is up the whole year. So you can definitely check that. And now let's talk about the how. So 2/3 of the presentation done. So what can you contribute with, you might think? I already gave a bunch of hints. So you already know that you can implement new features, fix bugs, you can contribute with designs or wireframes, solution architecture, outreach and research. And if outreach and research doesn't ring a bell to you, an example of outreach is, for example, writing a blog post on how to use a specific open source library, or writing a blog post that in some way promotes a project, right? You're outreaching, you're taking this project to the eyes of other people outside of the already existing community. You have also documentation. You can contribute to documentation in code. You can contribute to overall documentation of the project, no matter where it is, if it's on in a Google Docs or GitHub Wiki, GitLab Wiki. You can also test the deployed versions of a software, report bugs, has issues, or create issues to improve a project. You can help others contribute. Imagine that you are already used to a certain project and you see newcomers coming to the project. You can help them starting contributing. You can help guide them on, okay, you can start here and here if you want to start contributing with X project. You can review others' work. So if you're contributing with coding, you may submit a pull request, which is the way on GitHub that you submit your work. You say that here's my code and I want to merge this code. You can review pull requests. You can review pull requests and contribute with your knowledge about a certain technology or about the specific code being implemented. You can give feedback. So imagine you are within a community and someone asks for feedback on a specific thing, maybe a design they do, and they ask feedback of the community. You can contribute with feedback and many other things. These are just the ones that I came up with, but anything that moves the project forward, it's a valid contribution. So just to emphasize, no matter where what you contribute within the tech industry, if you're a technical writer, a developer, QA tester, a designer, project manager, or just an everyday interested person, a person interested in tech, you can contribute to open source. Let it sink in. And now in terms of steps. So now that you know that you can contribute to open source, what are the steps? Very broadly speaking, well, you find a problem to solve, you work on it, and you submit the work. There may be many more steps, and we can be a bit more specific, but it will always depend on the contribution guidelines of a certain project. So now in terms of examples, this is an example of a coding PR. So basically, there was a bug in mentorship backend, which is one of the projects I maintain, and a contributor decided to solve this bug. And then I ended up reviewing the code. So if I want to be a bit more specific, if you have to change the actual code of a project, the high-level steps would be you will fork the project, and I will show this in a demo, in a short demo. You fork the project, so you create a copy of the project to your account on GitHub or GitLab. You clone the project to your local environment. You work on code. You do what you have to do. You commit and push, and these are well, concepts from Git. I hope you know. I will mention it later. You commit and push your changes, and then you submit the pull request. And throughout this whole process, if you have doubts and if you have questions, you have to communicate. You have to communicate in any way. It's not just if you have doubts or questions, but also imagine you're taking 10 days or more to solve an issue. If you give updates, the maintainers know that, okay, this person is still working on this issue. So always have in mind, communicate so that you let maintainers know in what phase of the development you are. So when I say communicate, you might think, okay, where do I communicate? So the first thing that comes to my mind is if you're contributing in the GitHub platform, you have the issue tracker, you have the pull requests, so you can leave comments there, and that's a way to communicate your updates. For example, you can on an issue, imagine you're taking 3 days. You can say there, hey, I'm working on this specific part, or hey, I have this doubt. Can you please help me? So these are some obvious ones. And then there's also when you have a community around the project, these projects may have a specific communication channel outside of the platform that hosts the code. So some communities or projects might use Zulip, Discord, or Gitter or Slack. And sometimes if you want to have if you want to have a bigger discussion around what you're developing, or if you want to know more about the project, you may have to go to these communication channels to interact with the community. So here's an example of a design contribution. This is actually an open PR in the community I'm in. And this is from a contributor of ours who created this asset for the open source page, our open source website. Another example, once I saw this tweet, and basically someone just decided to contribute with a logo for a project. It is a command line project, so it might not have a lot of user interface, but you have the logo on the README. It looks nice. Documentation. Well, as I said before, you can contribute to documentation, the overall documentation of a project, solution architecture, how the code is organized, documentation about features. You can also document other types of things. For example, during Google Summer of Code, I started documenting some QA tables. So basically to let people know how they could test the backend API, REST API that I was building, how they could test specific endpoints, and what they should expect from these from a specific execution of the endpoint, from a specific test case. Now, quality assurance, I'm very excited about this one. I really like this one because I think that sometimes we forget about the testing part. Sometimes we do code reviews and we may not test the code. I know sometimes engineers don't run the code, but they look at the code and, well, it's fine. I don't think anything that could go wrong here. So I really appreciate that in our in the community. I mean, we are now trying to introduce this quality assurance step or culture of testing the PR. So having someone that will produce a test report on a PR, and of course, uh, if we forget PRs, if you test the deployed version of a software, you can just report the bugs, right? Like this example. The test report that I mentioned before. So this is an example of someone within the community who tested the code of a PR, a pull request, and reported the behavior. So confirmed that the behavior was working fine. Now, an example of feedback. So I really like to show this example, and there's a blog post that I can share also later. But basically, this was way before I was in the community, but I saw this blog post and I really love it's called The Importance of Feedback. Basically, in the first image, you see someone in a wheelchair, but it looks kind of inactive. You can read there more on the blog post, but it looks kind of inactive, almost looks like uh, she's waiting for someone to take an action. So throughout the process of designing these, people gave feedback, and the result was having a lady, but holding the wheel on the wheelchair, right? So it shows more, it shows that the person is active, the person is in control of the situation. So I really love this example. I encourage you to read the blog post. Uh, and now other types. Well, I don't know how to describe this type of contribution. It's a sort of invisible one, but basically when I joined the community, I noticed that there wasn't topics under each project on the GitHub profile. So I decided to join all the tags. So for example, Power Up Android or Mentorship Android, they are both Android projects. Mentorship Android uses Kotlin, uh, MVVM architecture uses retrofit. So I decided to uh, gather these topics so that then we could have this. We could have the topics aligned with the projects on the GitHub profile. And this can be extremely useful for a newcomer coming to the organization, and perhaps they want to contribute with Python. So they have mentorship backend. They can see right away, okay, this is a Python project. This uses Flask. Okay, I know Flask. So perhaps I may contribute to this project. Now, another example is I noticed that the GitHub wiki sidebar wasn't very organized. So I just decided to create a Markdown template. So here it is. This is sort of the wiki sidebar we have at the moment. Um, yeah, I just decided to do it. I shared the Google Docs, and then we started applying to plenty of projects. So now I want to talk just a bit about some blockers you might face in your open source journey. How and where to start contributing. I hope I answered this already. You can see organization on the Google Summer of Code website. You can look for projects you already know. You can start small. You can start with just Markdown contributions. So with just text contribution, fixing typos perhaps. Not seeing many beginner issues. This can be an issue for sure. And if you're starting, it can be demotivating not seeing issues that you feel you can contribute to. But in this case, so there's a specific label that is shared in some issues when a maintainer wants to signal, hey, this issue is a good first issue. They might label has good first issue or has first timers only. So if you look for that specific label, you may find these beginner issues. Or if you don't find any like this, remember that you can always create your own opportunity. I did this for one of the projects back in 2018 in the community, I mean, where I noticed that there was a text on the website that could be improved. So I created the issue, maintainers approve it, and then I just submitted a PR to fix it. And you also can contribute with documentation. So think about all of the different ways you can start contributing to get acquainted to the project. Another blocker, not feeling confident with the skills. Well, gaining confidence is a process. Okay, I started with the Markdown file, then I started with the an Android PR, and then I got into Google Summer of Code, and I had to learn how to use Flask from scratch. So confidence is something that comes along the way. I have to admit, sometimes when I try to contribute to other projects, I am always a little hesitant. Yeah, confidence is something that you gain, and you just have to push it through. Some projects might seem intimidating. I totally understand this. There are some projects that I don't even come near. For example, Visual Studio Code. I use it. I use it, but the code might seem a bit intimidating. It might be a big, complex project. So this is normal. Well, open source is a wild west. You may find very simple projects and very complex projects. My advice for this is look at the documentation, look at past history of issues and PRs, uh, conversations within the various communication channels until you get a grasp of the project, and try to start with beginner issues. Another thing, lack of time. I hear this a lot. I have a lot of people that sometimes tell me that they want to contribute to open source and it stays there, and then they don't. So what I have to say about these, the reason that I find time to contribute to open source is because I prioritize it, right? So for me, lack of time could be said in another way. It's lack of prioritizing open source, right? And you can also always start small. You can try, for example, okay, I will dedicate 1 hour each weekend to contribute to open source, right? So you have many ways to look at this. And if you do something you like in open source, I think you'll find the time for it, okay? And this is actually one that I never heard for anyone else. So one thing that sometimes happens is a contributor, okay, gets assigned to an issue and then doesn't update, just abandons the issue. So I can see as a problem sometimes not even wanting to say, I want to contribute to this issue for fear um, of not being able to finish it. What I have to say about this is transparency is always key, being honest. So if maintainers are counting on you to contribute to a certain issue and you cannot contribute to an issue, that's totally fine. You just have to communicate that to the maintainer. You just have to update the issue and say, hey, I cannot work on these anymore. You can give reasons or not. This is open source. You choose what you do on your spare time. And now some nice to knows. So if you have to contribute to the code of a specific project, you may have to know Git. So imagine you're contributing with something other than code. Imagine you're a technical writer or a designer. So I showed the PR where someone added a design resource. This contributor had to know Git to push the changes, right? To push the resources. So this is something you may have to look after. I cannot cover everything, but keep this in mind. And also opensource.guide. I'm always amazed when I go to this website and I see there's always new things. And I'm amazed how they have guides regarding open source in many aspects. For example, here I'm trying to focus on how to contribute to a project, but there are other layers in open source. Has how to build a community around the project, how to maintain a project, what are the best practices, what are bad practices, and opensource.guide is a great resource for it. Now, I just want to show a quick demo for those who may not know how to use GitHub, perhaps. And I have this issue in one of the projects that I maintain, Mentorship Flutter. And basically, imagine I want to fix this issue, okay? So this is about replacing the current commit message style guide. Okay, so as I said before, you have to fork the project. So I will fork this to my profile on GitHub. Just wait a bit. Okay. And now, and I should have done this. Okay. So what is the file that I should change? Well, when I created this, I didn't forget. Okay. So what I want to change is in the contribution markdown file. And I will not use command line here because of lack of time. But just know that if you're contributing with something very small, you can use the GitHub interface. So I know that, okay, this is basically using a wiki page that exists on Mentorship Android, but we want to use on Mentorship Flutter. So I'll just change this. Let me quickly find this. Android. I don't want Android here. I want Flutter because I want to direct to the Flutter wiki. And I'm updating, update, commit style guide link on contribution guidelines. Too big of a commit. Okay, so this is what I'm doing, and I can create a new branch. Usually, this is a good thing to do. Yeah. Okay. Propose file change, and once you work right on this, then I want to submit this pull request to the original project, which is okay. So I want to contribute to compare. Okay. Well, I want to contribute to the actual. Okay. So the change is done. Let me compare and pull request. Yes, this is what I wanted to see. I want to have the base repo has the original one. So I'm just updating this, and the issue, I think it was 61. It's good to provide a good pull request description. Okay, don't forget about that. I just don't have time to do it right now. And I created a pull request. So now you can see in the main rep, I have this pull request to be reviewed by my two co-maintainers of this project. And yeah, they just have to review this and approve this. However, I want this to be a first timers only, so I will close the pull request. This was really just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so going back to the presentation, I just want to give a quick shout out to the community. I mean, we focus a lot on, we try to focus on multiple types of contribution, like quality assurance, content, design, coding, advocacy. We have projects for social good. And we participate in a lot of open source programs. So if you want to get started with open source, feel free to join our community and try to contribute to some first timers issues. And it's a beginner friendly community. I can promise that. And yes, it's time for a Q&A. And I hope you all learn stuff in here.
All right. Thank you, Isabel, for this great presentation. We don't have any questions from the audience to your session. So
I'm on Slack.
Yeah, you are on Slack, also on Twitter. If anyone has future questions, be welcome to post them on to Isabel. Well, I have to say a great thank you to you, Isabel. Thank you for being with us. We hope to see you next year. And for everyone that is with us attending this session, enjoy the break and see you in about 15 minutes to the next session. Thank you very much.